look, for a long time, the SEC dominated this sport. I don't think there's any question. Would they win 9 straight titles? 8?
8. I think it was 8 straight in 13 of 14.
And then
Maybe
it was
something like that.
The one that broke it, other than one Ohio State, it's like, well, it's Clemson.
2 Clemson.
Right.
2 Clemson, 1 Ohio State.
For most of the country,
Michigan.
it's like, oh, so just because they're not in the SEC, it's like the school in South Carolina wins it? Okay. There was the one Urban Meyer team, and that's been it for a long time. But the sport is different now. First off, we have a playoff of 12 teams. If we went with the BCS formula, it would have been Oregon versus Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
How's that turning out for you? Yeah.
Not too good.
Yeah, not very good. 4-team, whatever. They did expand and add Texas, so they do have an SEC team in this thing, but it is different. We have Ohio State, we have Penn State, we have Notre Dame, and I think this is reality now. If I've said it many, many times on this podcast for many, many years, but you talk to economists, and the way that you change talent dispersion is through salary. If you're how do you attract great talent? You pay a little extra if you live in an area that's less desirable. It's easier to get someone to move to Miami than Midland, Michigan, something like that. So you got to pay more, or you got to find a way. And now you can pay, and now you can transfer. And you take these guys, like, the transfer market is much easier. And again, these Notre Dame kids were grad transfers, but yeah, they don't mind that, oh, the campus isn't that popping socially or whatever. Maybe they're like, hey, I can get like a Notre Dame like accounting degree, something like that. Why'd they go there? Who cares? They went to Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, these schools. It is very statistically more probable than not that this is the second straight year the national champion will come from the North. Michigan won it last year. They played Washington in that title game. It is a totally different deal, and I don't know that that's going to change. Pat,
it's a war of northern aggression, Dan. Here they come, coming south, coming to get the players, coming to get the trophies. Going to go to Atlanta, and we'll see if Texas of all people is there to defend SEC pride. Texas, which, part of the whole SEC argument has always been that, the crucible of the league is what makes them so good, right? Texas was this good last year. Texas was a Final Four team as a Big 12 team last year. Being in the SEC didn't make Texas a playoff semifinalist. Being Texas made Texas an SEC semifinalist. And you look around, let's look, Ohio State, best player that we've seen maybe so far in the playoff, Jeremiah Smith, he's from Miami. Went down and got him. Riley Leonard's from Fairhope, Alabama. Quite sure that Alabama didn't want him, but he's playing and Alabama is not. Bo Collins was at Clemson and was their best receiver at Clemson. Clemson's been hurting for receivers. He's still playing. Clemson isn't. That's not the SEC, but that's the South. It's pretty interesting. It really is. And, this year of all years, given the amount of posturing of basically the SEC and or Big Ten threatening to just kind of go take their ball and do what they want with it, like, well, not really backing it up on the field. They have in the past, absolutely, without question. The SEC has been the best conference. But right here, right now, after watching Georgia lose by 13 points, after watching Tennessee get absolutely dump trucked, after watching Texas barely get by Arizona State, and watching Alabama flop and South Carolina lose, Texas A&M lose, it hadn't been a great run since the playoff pairings came out, and all we heard from some corners was that the SEC was going to stomp everybody and show that they should have had more teams in the playoff. It hasn't worked out that way. So we'll see how far the war of northern aggression goes, but it's an interesting little plot line.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a commissioner this morning call me and say, Ross, the gap isn't as big as everybody says it is, or as they say it is. They being the SEC and probably to a degree the Big Ten too. It's not as big and the game's played out that way, he said. And I think, I think there's a point to that. I think we've seen some of that. And we've talked all season about how all of college football is more has more parity and more equitable because of specifically the transfer movement and the transfer portal spreading out the talent like it has. And I think that's partly what we're seeing here. When you look at and Dan brought up a good point with you level the playing field in a way with salaries, and you look at, I think it was 2/3 of the 4 and 5 stars for a 10-year span. So I think this was 2010 to 2019. 2/3 of the 4 and 5 star recruits were from the 11 state footprint of the SEC. So of course, naturally, a lot of them are going to stay home, right? And we saw 16 up until last year, 16 of the previous 17 national champions in college football came from a tiny little circle of the Deep South, except for the one Ohio State win. And now we're probably going to have, we're definitely going to have we're definitely going to have a second straight year of a team from outside of that Deep South circle win the national championship. Even if Texas does win, they are outside of that circle. And I think that is attributed to not just NIL, but the transfer movement, spreading out the talent. And I think it's probably good for all of college football. Probably not good for the SEC, but I think it is good for all of college football. And that should be, in the end, good for the SEC, you would think, if we can have, as Greg Sankey has said it many times, a national championship from coast to coast. This is a national organization. When he's asked over and over about the NCAA and separating from the NCAA and breaking off, he always goes to the same comment, which is, this is a national association. We want to compete nationally. We want a national championship. And I think as we move forward, we have more of that than ever.
So the last time we had 2 straight years without an SEC/Deep South team in the championship game was 04-05. It's been 20 years.